So on our final meditation now on John 19 and 20, just before we come to Advent, I want to talk for a few minutes about the phenomenal theology of Karl Barth. Barth was a Swiss pastor/theologian writing just after World War I in the context of confronting liberal theology throughout Europe. And he became famous for his commentary on Romans, his voluminous church dogmatics, and what's known as dialectical theology. So dialectical theology is really when you start with the transcendence of God, the otherness of God, the unknowability of God, and yet that is juxtaposed against the knowability of God in Christ. So you're always dealing in a sense with paradoxes, with a dichotomy of truths, one on one side and one on the other. So Barth was profoundly convinced of the transcendence, the otherness of God, and yet the otherness of God made known to us in Jesus, the concrete historic reality of the person of Jesus Christ. So within the atonement, he continues his dialectic theology and has an absolutely brilliant move that he plays in the middle of it. So when Barth looks at the cross, he sees this as both the divine yes and the divine no. The divine yes, in that God is saying yes to humanity in Christ. He is saying yes to love and forgiveness and victory and the new creation in Christ. He is saying yes to the swallowing up of all opposition and the liberation of humankind in his son Jesus. So all of that is the divine yes of the cross. Simultaneous to that is the divine no, where God is saying no. In Christ, he is saying no to death and to sin and to evil and to wickedness and to Satan and to hell and to all opposition and corruption that would be active against humanity, to be active against creation and God and truth. So we have both of these things played out simultaneously on the cross, where really the totality of reality, the cosmic conflict of history and creation are fully realized in that moment of yes and no on the death of the Son of God and the resurrection of the Son of God. Now, not only that, but Barth also plays a brilliant move in that he was writing, obviously, post-Calvin, and he tackles Calvinism in a really interesting way within his text. This is found in Church Dogmatics, Volume 4, on Reconciliation, where he says that he believes in election. Barth believes in election, just like Calvin taught election, knowing that those who were sovereignly chosen by God are the elect. Those who choose God are the elect, and the rest are reprobate. They are resisted and kept at a distance from God. This move, though, is interesting because he says, I too believe in election, and yet he says Jesus is the elect one, and in Jesus all cosmos, all creation, and all humanity are represented before the throne of the Father. Everything and everyone is elect in Jesus. So he plays this extraordinary move where he says, I believe in election, not that we choose individually, but rather just by virtue of existence, we are elect in Christ. Barth is known as the most Christocentric and Jesus-necessary theologian I think there has ever been. And he puts that right in the middle of the atonement, and he would probably preach to say, he doesn't believe that the atonement is a theory. The atonement is a person. The atonement is Jesus, and not just the death and resurrection of Jesus, but actually the full incarnation of Jesus results in atonement, results in reconciliation with God, because in Christ, creation and particularly humanity has been recapitulated, has been reoriented, regathered and structured inside the person of Jesus. You could say cosmically and ontologically and spiritually, we have been brought into Christ, with Jesus being the archetype of humanity and new humanity. Just by virtue of our humanity, we are now in Christ and are able to choose him as the elect. So he reconstructs Calvinism in, I think, a much more biblical and creative and generous way that I think actually reflects more of the heart of the gospel. So Barth got himself into a bit of hot water by proposing something that at face value can be considered a Christian universalism, which he denied, but not very vehemently. He would say that he did not teach universalism, but his theology actually allows for a universal interpretation. So he's an interesting guy and proposes an extremely generous gospel, all of which is Christ-centered and atonement necessary, and sees the victory of Jesus being established over all opposition. So, fascinating contribution to theology by Karl Barth, and I think well worth our consideration, as it expands the gospel from being a legal transaction to being a full embrace, the full reconciliation of God to humanity in Christ, and all the mystery that is involved around that. So if you're up for it, I'd encourage you to have a little wade into book 4 of the Dogmatics, called Reconciliation, and it is heavy lifting, but it is extraordinary territory to explore together. So enough for now. I'll see you in the next video, and we'll consider a little bit of our Advent meditation. Till then, peace.